Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being there. This is Rafa from Mystic Times. I'm very happy to be joined today by my spiritual friend, Pan. This is one of our, I think it's our third conversation together. They generally are very, very powerful and very straight to the point. I'm really blessed to have the opportunity to speak with Pan. And well, I want to thank everybody that's been joining us for all the episodes of the show or for a few. And also I want to remind everybody that we're going to do 2 hours, and the second hour will be available on Patreon. So you can just contact me or check the links in the description of the show to get to that, and you will have access to a bunch of extra episodes. And I'm also posting some music and sound baths, and the intention is to eventually start doing some community things, but we need to make more to have more members in the Patreon there. So I also appreciate you guys sharing it with your friends and sharing this video with anybody that you think might benefit from it. So without further ado, welcome, Pan. How are you?
Very good. And how are you?
I'm doing very good as well. We were speaking just before we started recording, and trying to. I have this question which I think is relevant, and I had it. It was kind of hard for me to put into words. So yeah, thank you for your time before, like helping me get it more like clear. So I don't know if you would like, I could ask this question and we can just hit it up from there. Okay, very good. So the question, I'll give a little bit of background without naming any names, but so there's this experience that I think, or that we've seen. It's an experience that comes up for people sometimes, and it's connected to our. It has connections to many things. So to our childhood traumas and wounds. It has connection to our image of ourselves, to who we think we are, or what we think we deserve. It's also got to do with fear and with connecting to our true nature and to our essence. And it's this idea of people sometimes through many different means, maybe. So through perhaps yoga, meditation, through shamanic work, through breath work, through perhaps even psychedelics, people, or sometimes even in a spontaneous way, which would actually be kind of even scarier for whoever got that experience. People have had this kind of transcendental experience of reaching or contacting oneness or non-duality, and reaching this place or this eternal place of nothingness and everything and potential. Perhaps it's the quantum field, I don't know. People have had this experience of contacting this very central place, and when you reach this place, fear comes up, and this question of being nothing and the fear of being nothing. So the ego sets up or boots up and goes online, and this fear comes up, and this question of what if you reach or become aware of this place of oneness and you reject it? What if you don't want it?
Okay. It's a bit a complex subject, but I try to make it as simple as possible. So let's start from that what we most of the people do not remember. Before we come into the human form, we are on this other dimension or other side, where there is oneness, there is no separation in the not yet manifested human form. where you connect, where you're one with just existence. And when we come into the womb, when the soul comes into the womb and you get born, you forget that. The memory disappears. But there are children who still remember this until they say to a certain age, about between 4 and 6, 7, it fades out. When you see a very small child, the baby state, in their eyes, you see they are still without a personality, because the mind is just a seed. So we come to this planet, so the soul, let's call it the soul or the spirit, comes to that planet to have the human experience. And that does not happen without some, shocking, traumatic experiences from small on. That's part of the human story. So if that happens, it depends when it happens, that a child is overloaded with the emotional impression it gets. That can be very severe, to physical abuse, to violence. That can happen to accidents. What is a shocking experience? That can happen to natural catastrophes. You can be born in a wartime, or what, and then you get these impressions. And so for the childish psyche, it cannot take this emotional impression, because it gives you so much fear of disappearing again, and you just have started to live. So our brain will put this in a fragment and put this into the subconscious. So we learn that when something is fearful, to block the feeling, because when you are small, you cannot take it. And often the grown-ups the so-called grown-ups have done the same, and cannot support the child, that it can release that fear and find the feeling of safety and protectedness again. Often they're left alone with it, so they have to repress it. So our mind, what later on develops, is basically a fear mind. It gets then identified, the mind gets identified with a body, with its thoughts and the feelings. Out of these impressions, the mind forms the concept of me. And it has the experience, I have to stay in control, otherwise something happens what is too much for me, and it triggers the fear of dying again, of the fear of disappearing. So when the consciousness or the soul comes into the form, it is like water. This water takes the form of the glass, right? Otherwise, it is just spread. Now, this is a good sample. So this is the consciousness. It takes the form of the water and then becomes identified with the form of the glass. So the same happens with our soul, or the consciousness, what comes into in this system called human being. It starts to identify, you could say, with a vehicle, with a container. And then the mind knows that this form, the physical form, is fragile, it can die, and you have that experience. Every child has that experience more or less at some point, often very early. You fall from a tree, you fall ill, You fall from your bicycle. You're having accidents where you experience pain and fearful impressions. So you come to know, oh, I could die, you see, and then you come maybe in contact with it, that some members of the family died. I remember my first impression that I am somebody in particular was when I had an accident, what every children have sooner or later. I was falling very hard on my face, broke a little bit the nose, and was pain and blood all over. That gave me the first impression, oh, that's me, because it was a very painful experience. It was not so severe after all, but it was a shock. Before that, before such experiences, we have no notion of our separateness or no identification with the body. Actually, only more or less to painful experiences, to shocks, we get this identification. If it is a very positive, creative experience, it does not create an identification, actually only the shocks or the traumas, if it is more severe. And traumas have a huge range, say the mild traumas everybody more or less have, until very severe ones, what can split your brain, your mind, into different personalities who have no connection to each other. Yeah, have heard from a woman who had extreme abuse. She had more than 300 personalities, and you go mad with that. But it was healable. That's the good news. So now to what you pointed at, now to some circumstances, one has the experience of oneness again, what means you lose, you forget the identification with your body, with the thoughts and the feelings. And that can be for a few moments or for a certain time. And then the mind switches on and gets shocked. Because for the mind means now I'm dead. I have died. Yeah. And then it taps into that what we call the survival mode and stops the experience to bring you back to the known. So to say, if there is an awakening happening and somebody is not prepared, it is experienced as a catastrophe, as a calamity, as a curse. Yeah? Because you think you're going mad or you're losing your body or something like that. Yeah? That happens also, but not very often. Luckily. Yeah. There are the collision with unknowable, I cannot exactly recall the title. It was Susan Siegel, a very famous book, who she had this experience, and then it was interpreted, she was a psychologist, as a loss of identification, a loss of personality, and that she is interpreted as a mental illness, and you have to bring people back to the identification. So if it is unprepared, it's very difficult. But it can also go well. So, but commonly or usually, it happens to a certain preparation. Of course, to substances, it can come also like a shock because you're not prepared for it. This is the other possibility. Or to accidents. But often, it has one good side. It changes your life, your perspective on life. Yeah. So the traumas come to shocks and the healings also. So now when somebody decides, actually you do not decide that, you realize that this is what you have to live. It's more a discovery. To go on a spiritual path, then it is good to get slowly prepared. And the awakening actually can only happen when your traumatic mindset is dissolved or the traumas are healed. The traumas are on the level of the mind. And if the mind is very dominating and ruling and they are extreme, then you have first to go to a healing that you can take the state of being a nobody. Then that the basic fear of being eliminated, being not a thing. Nothing means you're not a thing. And the soul or the spirit, or call it consciousness, is not a thing. It's not matter. It keeps the matter alive, but it is not a thing, so to say. So the nothingness is only scary for a mind who is still traumatized and therefore identified with the body it's living in. In the space of consciousness, the mind arises. In the space of mind, the body and the feelings arise. But the space of, you can call it soul space or presence or consciousness, is a non-manifested intelligence. Something what has no form but exists. And because that exists, matter exists. So when people have such experiences where they get scared, what happens to many, it happened also to me. I remember this. It was my first trip to the Himalayas, and I was out there close to actually next to the Tibetan border. But in those days you could not cross. It was completely sealed off in Nepal. And there I had an experience where I where in that state of oneness, I was listening. It was a meditative space. I was listening to a waterfall who was close by, and I was lying in the hut of the people who hosted us. They had extra rooms, so they were renting it for hikers. And then I went so deep into the sounds of that waterfall that I started to forget what you usually call yourself. And at some point, the mind realized that it does not know who it is and where I am. And my name and all these points of identification. And then it freaked out because it could not recall it. And then it became so fearful, so paranoid, actually. So it started to panic. And then it had one memory, and this is really nicely absurd, that in my backpack is a paper. And in that paper is a photo of me. And there is written the name and where I am. And in that panic, I really threw everything out of that backpack until I had my passport. And it opened it. And then that was actually a very healing shock. Say, my God, you're such a fool. That is such a beautiful space. And you just get identified with an identification paper called your passport. And there you can read your name. And then you look at the stamp. And then you know in which country you are, because that's the visa for Nepal. And it was actually at that point, I started to laugh, say, my God, now you know what identification is. That's why you have an identity paper. And it was so ridiculous that the mind believes this paper is the proof for my existence. What it is still in our world. You can stand in front of whatsoever immigration officer and say, look, it's me. Say, no, you have to show.
Where is your birth certificate? No, I'm here. No, your birth certificate.
You need a certificate, you need an identity card. I see you, but officially you do not exist. So we live in a very crazy world, actually.
This reminds me, those times, maybe this happens to you, when you go into a room and you forget what you were going to get, yes. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. So I understand, you see, that moment the mind needs an identity. Because it is without that identity, it believes, and this is a very long belief we carry as humans, then I'm dead, and then I'm no more there, and then I do not exist. So if you have these experiences for the first time, can be very shocking. It's actually shocking, because it provokes all I would say, the primal fears again, not only from this life, from your traumatic experiences from this life. People also carry traumatic experiences from other lives, and they are even more difficult to understand because you have forgotten, but they still can resonate. So, but all this happened on the way to my master, so I was already in good hands, so to say. And then I had more experiences of that kind. So I was well prepared and had such experiences before from what Stan Grove calls non-ordinary states due to the use of LSD. So I went a few times to that, so it became less and less scary. But now it's just a joke, because the mind fears what it does not know. So it's a very simple and logical procedure. Let it come to know, and it loses the fear. So you need, so to say, as a preparation, this is a preparation, quite a few experiences what in the Zen tradition or in India they call satoris. That means little experiences of non-duality, of oneness. And then the mind relaxes with that, because it is a memory system. Then it stores in its memory, but you didn't die. It's not dangerous. It's actually very interesting, very adventurous, there are new possibilities open. The band frequency of reality of existence, it's huge as existence, as huge as this universe, and they say it's still expanding. So it's enormous. What the human system, our body-mind system, our brain, translates only a small aspect of what exists. And that's then the human reality. It's like this. And then, now my hands go out of the picture, so it's huge. Yeah. So, and when you are identified, it's like this. It gets even smaller, because you have to filter so many scary memories out. Yeah. So people need to get slowly experienced in witnessing, in meditation, that they can heal their traumatic impressions. Awakening is actually a very simple thing. You get disidentified from the fear mind. You realize that fear doesn't exist. But it's a very confusing thing. On the feeling level, it exists because it exists in your subconscious memory. When you come back to the here and now, then there is no danger. And when you know what you really are, then there is immortality. Because the soul or the spirit is eternal. We have so many, and that's the beauty of our time, that so many people can be brought back to the body. They were clinical already dead. We had so many people who have these near-death experiences. And that changes their lives. They have been atheists, never believed in anything beyond themselves, and so on. But then they realize that the physical death is not the end. It's just the beginning of another experience, a more unlimited experience, and the bandwidth, what you can experience, it's much larger because it is not limited to a body-mind system. But the good news is, it is said that we only use a certain percentage of our brain capacities. So if you go beyond your identification, the capacity of the potential capacity of our brain, we have there a few million receptors who are not stimulated. So they are not working, they are just potentially could open and function. So your ability to experience, the ability to have perception beyond the usual norm, your ability to be sensitive and to take very deep and intense feelings expands enormously. So back to that question, when people have unexpected or unprepared or surprising experiences of oneness, and then the mind checks that, freaks out and stops it. A seed is put. There is suddenly, it's like you had a look out of the window and now you know there is a world outside of the house you thought this is all. Yeah, you imagine you're living in a house and the curtains are, the shutters are down. It gives you the impression this is all what exists. And then to some circumstances, somebody had pulled up the shutters, opened the curtain, and to coincidentally, in quotation marks, you look out of the window and say, wow, there's a world outside. And you may go to the door and open it, and then, oh, it's big. And then the mind comes back and says, oh, it's dangerous, it's scary, get in. But the good news is the mind is a recording system. Now it knows. It's the famous story of, this is an old story from Asia. One day the king invited a beggar to his palace. And he got to experience all the pleasures a king experiences. And after a certain time, he was thrown out of the palace and put back to the street. He couldn't live there anymore. He knew the difference. Before he was relatively fine and happy. Okay, that's my life. That's my reality. Now he came to know another one. It's describes the situation. It's great when people have such experiences, but what you need then, you have to be open and ask, I would say, let's call it a spiritual friend or guide who knows these experiences, who is familiar with, let's call it non-ordinary states. I like that phrase. Who is not scared of it anymore, actually has settled in that space. And these people can encourage you, can support you in a way, guide you to go further in. And actually, it's your own potential. It's not that you get it from somebody. You just remember it. Since we come all out of what we call the source and the oneness, the non-duality, the non-dual state, the mystical state of awakening, and when it crystallizes more, we could call it enlightenment, is what we all know. Because we come from there. But to the human experience, to coming into a body, we forget. It's an amazing, crazy play.
It's a crazy paradox, right? Like that idea of, can God create a stone so heavy that he can't lift it? And it seems like he can, yeah. He's that powerful.
So the non-manifested universal consciousness, you can call it also the quantum field or unified field, or if you want to have it more scientific, just the universal information. What is holographic? Because in each grain of sand is the whole information. In the biggest star and the smallest piece of matter is the same information. Every atom carries everywhere is the same information. So this is a consciousness without a manifestation. And to me, it came like this, but it likes to play. It's the leela, the playfulness, the play of the divine. But how can it play when it has no manifestation? It cannot play. For the play, it has to manifest. And for the manifestation, it has to take one risk, to forget what it is. And then the play becomes a serious thing, and that's the human world. There, anything thinkable and not thinkable happens. And we are here. You see, the experiment humanity. It's an experiment of the universal consciousness or the universal information. It wanted to play, so it created a Milky Way, galaxies, all that, it manifested. And then there is the creation called the planet Earth, and there is a species called Homo sapiens. What is created to realize his origin. And the paradox is that only works to forgetfulness. To the forgetfulness, the play can happen. And it has to be temporary. If life would be guaranteed, there would be no mysticism, no interest in philosophy, religion, anything, because everything is guaranteed. You can commit suicide and it doesn't work. There would be no evolution because everything is guaranteed. The preciousness is of life in the form. It's that it is fragile. That's the power of a rose, it's very fragile, but such a beauty. That's the power of life. It's so beautiful and so fragile. And we as humans are very powerful and very helpless in the same time. And when we are small, we are very helpless. And in a more conscious, compassionate humanity, we would protect children. and not putting them unnecessary and even on will to traumatic experiences for certain reasons. You maybe have heard from MK Ultra, Mind Control Ultra. This is the most criminal, the most evil program they ever have invented. Actually, it's inhuman, absolutely inhuman. And research and the foundation was laid in the country I'm recently living, in Germany, by the fascists. There was this unfamous Dr. Mengele, who experimented with prisoners, with Jews and war prisoners and their children, how to split their minds, to use them for certain purposes. And it's not so long ago what I came to know, that when Nazi Germany was defeated, this guy was taken to the US to train the CIA with their evil knowledge and research. And certainly the Russians, who also occupy the other part of Germany, took some of these former SS specialists from the Gestapo, who had trained these things, who did research for the KGB. So still this kind of spirit is around, and is on intention. This is far beyond common traumas. They are planned with very small children already. This is too shocking, and it needs to come out to the light, and it comes out to the light. Such things have to end. This is just far too far. And in our current situation, what we do under this cover of COVID with children, we traumatize them. In Germany, they told to the children, and this is to the media and to politics, you tell children, if you do not wear your mask, you kill your grandpa or your grandma. You put children in a trauma. Of course, this is plain nonsense, but a child believes it and lives under that curse. I might be guilty that my beloved grandpa or grandma or my mother or my father dies. This is traumatizing a generation. This is criminal. This is mad. And we, under that whole COVID cover, we traumatize the next generation and more or less the whole population. So this is a kind of ancient struggle between darkness and light, and the darkness went a bit too far. So we need many people to awaken, to become fearless, because you can be only put into these situations, into this absurd obedience to absurd measures when you're still under the spell of the fear mind. It is very remarkable that dictatorships, communistic, fascistic, doesn't matter what, enormously repress and fear spiritual people, because they could come to know their true nature and become fearless. So yeah, you can kill the body, but you cannot kill the soul. And the soul comes back and continues. There is a strong spirit of freedom in human beings. And however, to decades, it was repressed, dominated, it never disappeared. And it's still here. And it goes now to a new round. We are free beings by birth. Nobody has the right to take it away. And people who claim that right are inhuman, are lost souls. I'm not condemning this, you're most likely extremely traumatized. So you lose the empathy. You cannot feel what the other feels, what you do to them. You do something weird to them, you cannot feel them. And without a spirit, then you're just a piece of matter. Then life has no value. What you see in extreme countries like China, life has no value. You just imprison 1 million people because they are still believing in Allah. And that's not wanted in the communist philosophy. The founder of communism, Karl Marx, was a member of the Satanic Church and a Freemason in a secret society. And then you can imagine, this is very easy to understand, if you come from such a background where it is denied that humans have a soul, that there is a spirit, there's something divine. Whatsoever you develop out of such a basic belief is mad and inhuman and can only be destructive. It's dark. It has no light. So these are all the side effects of a range of traumatic experiences people went through. But the good thing is they are all healable to compassion, to understanding, to forgiveness, to non-judgmental approach. And there is another good news. So since we are a bit in a dark phase globally, and we can be, some often say we can be grateful that the demons came out of the darkness because it will challenge the light. For the balance, the universe will stay in balance and the planet here also. There are sometimes dark phases, but they all collapse in themselves because it's against universal law. What is still compassion, what is still a play of consciousness. But the paradox is, it also allows humans, for example, what is part of the creation, the free will to go against the universal law. We have that freedom to go against it. But then we will be self-destructive and destructive to whatsoever is around us, not only to our own species, to animals, plants, and the whole natural world. But I'm very optimistic in a way. This is just a phase, I call it the death-birth process of that. The species called Homo sapiens has to go to a higher manifestation. And therefore, everything what hinders, there is not only individual trauma, there is collective trauma. And if you look into history, we have tons of it. And certain places are resonating very strong with it. All the Americas, there was genocide. This is a vibration what is still around. It can be healed and it will be healed, but it is there. There are many places in the world who are having you can say, a collective pain body. Because since decades, there have inhuman acts are happening and still happening. So to heal the individual trauma by going beyond the fear mind, you become a healer. It's your fate, it's your future, it's your fate. You see, as a physician, as a doctor, you do not need to be healthy and you can be still a good doctor. But let's say you become a physician of the soul, you need to be healthy. There it doesn't work. The healer has to be healed herself first. And then your next learning step is how to heal. And then by supporting people, actually you do not heal them, you support them only in self-healing because you had the support or you know how to heal yourself. And with that learning, you participate, so to say, in healing the collective, but the collective is many individuals. So we need to focus very strongly on this self-healing. And the support for it is there. You just need to be open for it. And the truth you feel in your heart. I cannot say what the truth is. The Tao I can speak is not the Tao. But I can feel in my heart, this is true. And there I do not need to argue arguments or any proofs. I just know it is true. I just use my mind to look then for evidence. Is it true what I feel this is true? And then I'm open for evidence. And that comes to me. The information comes. The interesting thing is the moment you have a real open mind, all information you need comes to you just because you are open. And it looks like coincidence. A friend sends you a book, says, this is interesting, you have to read it. Yeah, you open your tablet or laptop and scroll through and say, that's an interesting thing, I want to look at it. Yeah? It comes to you. You meet somebody who gives you the information you need. So the moment you are on consciously on a spiritual journey, there are no more coincidences. They look like, but they are not. So the trauma healing is very important, but remember, it's just on the level of the mind. If you have beyond mind experiences, there is no trauma, or you can translate trauma with a Sanskrit word equals karma. Beyond the mind is no karma, no trauma. Trauma is a Western thing, a Western phrase. Yeah? The Asian one from older culture call it karma. And then you have the same thing. You have personal karma, individual karma, and you have collective karma. If you're born in a certain background, then you're influenced by the collective karma of the area you are born in, of the country or the continent you're born on. This has a more dominating effect than in your actual life. If somebody is a very old soul, has been here many times, and then it becomes very huge and also very beautiful. You carry the karma of this race called Homo sapiens, the karma of humanity. And you can take it because you are fearless. Fearlessness means you still can feel the phenomenon of fear because you're still in the human form, you still have a mind what can interpret this as dangerous. That is a chemistry in your body. It has certain reactions. First, you feel it, fear. The fear phenomenon is a strange feeling in the hara area, some cramping in the belly, duodenum area. Cold sweat, shallow breathing, shaking knees, and in the extreme, your jaw start clappering, moving like shaking. That's the extremes, that the whole body is shaking in fear, as we say. This is the extreme state of fear on the physical level. Now, if there is a consciousness, you can just watch this and say, okay, there is the phenomenon of fear, but where is the danger? There is none. So psychological fear is a phenomenon, a misinterpretation of our mind, because it's still identified with the body and scared that the body is all what I am, and if I lose this, I'm gone. No, only the body is gone. The consciousness is still there. So if people, you see, had out-of-body experiences, they know. In meditation, what you described, that you have this experience of oneness, and then the poor mind who is not really yet familiar with that, freaks. That always happens in the beginning. Yeah, I accompanied many friends. I remember one of the early people who joined this creation lived here in the house where I'm still living. Had in a Nataraj meditation, in a dance meditation, certain the realization that she is not what she thought she is. She got such a fear, and I found her outside of the house, sitting on the bench, shaking on the whole body, and said, I do not exist anymore. Yeah. So this is great. But realize your body still exists. You just had an experience what you really are. That you are not the form, that you're not the matter. And so slowly, this is the art of meditation, the art of, or the process, you can also call it the process to awakening. Awakening is always a jump. And that's the next crazy thing. The enlightenment is a jump and a process in the same time. I used the picture, there is a jumping board into a swimming pool. There's a process to go to the end of the board, but then you jump. Otherwise, you do not, the jump does not happen. Now, if you're very fearful, you go many times to the edge and says, not today. Your mind has, it's too cold, or I'm not in the mood, And then you proceed back and forward, but one day you have to jump. You get bored with that procedure to postpone it. Yeah. So slowly people realize that that your true nature is spirit and not matter. But that does not mean that you do not take care of the matter. You see, there is this beautiful saying in the East, the body is the temple of the divine. And if this is really clear to somebody, then you take care of the temple, you clean it, you keep it in a good condition, you do everything that it is tidied up, so to say, that it is in a balance. It's a gift, the body, the mind, our brain, our enormous, beautiful ability to be sensitive, to feel, is the gift of the divine, is the gift of the consciousness. So we can be only grateful and appreciate it. But we need to remember what we really are. And this is soul, this is spirit, this is consciousness, and this is not personal. The paradox is it appears in a person, and the person is obvious, and you have a body feeling. So the body exists, but it is not you. And the whole job of these mystics is to prepare people step by step to remember this, to recognize that, and encourage them when they suddenly get an experience what shocks them. My God, I'm not. Yes, you're not what you thought. But it doesn't mean you evaporate immediately, You did not die. We call it in India twice born. The first birth is the body. The second birth is the soul. But for that birth, something, your belief system, means your fear mind, has to go to a psychological death, that the rebirth is the rebirth of the soul, of the spirit. That's the whole spiritual journey. Just to remember the source, what is the source of our aliveness in the form. Unprepared, I can repeat this again, is very shocking. Even prepared, it's shocking, but easier to take. And therefore you need, that is the, down the ages, you have, the Sufis call it a spiritual friend. Yeah, in Asia, it is called the master, the guru. They just, like midwives, they help you to be born. And once you are born, you do not need a midwife anymore. Only for a certain time, you need somebody to help you to grow up. And then you have find your own path. You find, or in better words, to find what is your contribution to the evolution of consciousness. You know, to me, it is like this. The reason why we are here, I like to put this in two phrases, is to contribute to the evolution of consciousness equals to be living compassion. And that's what we need the most on this planet, especially in such a crazy time where the global civilization is collapsing, because it's the time for it. It has to happen. And when things do not happen voluntarily, then they happen by force. And the crazy thing is, we humans are the force for our own collapse. We work on it without knowing that we're doing this. Yeah. So obviously, the next step in our evolution has to happen, and it happens always to shock and to crisis. And then you need a lot of compassionate people who carry the light of compassion, of conscious people who help people who are not yet stabilized, crystallized in their true nature. We can also call it their Buddha nature, to go to these confusing times, to awaken, to support, that the light can spread, that the evolution can unfold. And everybody who feels that call will find the support they need. It's always there. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Everything you were saying is very, very beautiful and very clear. Maybe we could make a pause here for a break for the second hour. But
Past already an hour?
Yeah, yeah, more or less. So
yeah, we did. So even 10 minutes more. So we were again in the timeless space.
Yeah.
Good that you watch the time. I lose it.
Yeah, no, I would like to just let go of that, but I try to also keep on my role. When I'm listening to you, I try to also stay in the role of host. So I take care of those things.
Thank you that you do it, because I forget everything. I'm out of time, and then it can be midnight.
Yeah, and really for me, even though I'm in this role, it feels like 5 minutes since you started talking. And during your talking, some questions come up, and then I feel like, oh, but I don't want to interrupt, and then they just fade away. But something that did stick, and we could maybe look at that in the second hour, is that so where in everything you were speaking, we were kind of looking at what came to me is that we were looking at like one side of the coin. So there's this experience of, maybe we could call it samadhi, or yes, this experience of oneness, and the fear mind comes up and kind of rejects it and says, no, I cannot be nothing. And then I seem to see that on the other side of this coin, there is this experience of samadhi. Then the mind comes back, just not in a traumatized way, but eventually the mind comes back online, and then you are left with this feeling of longing, of nostalgia, of this place that you experienced, and you're like maybe kind of trying to bring it back, trying to bring, right, to experience that.
The call has happened.
Yeah.
The magnetism is there. You have to go. Yes, that's the seed what made the sprout. Now it has to grow.
Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe we can look at that a little on the other side.
Yes.
And perhaps even if we have time, I was interested, and I think it could be nice for people to know a little bit more about your story and your experiences with Osho, your spiritual friend Osho. And yeah, so those are just ideas that I'm thinking we could explore on the second half. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
All right, very good. So thank you everybody for being there, for your openness to receive everything that Pan's been sharing. So again, to remind you, you can find a link for the Patreon, which will have the second part of this conversation, as well as many other conversations and music and sound healing that I'm sharing there. You can find all of that in the description below. So I want to thank you all and to remind you that you are not alone, that there is no reason, in the end, there is no reason to fear the darkness. It's just there to help the light wake up to itself. So thank you all for being there. Namaste, and see you in a little bit.
Later.